Hi, Mike from the rural Montana family. It is definitely time for a Starlink update. It is a good 5 months now that we're playing with Starlink. And if you've seen our last update, you know that we were planning on extending the data cable to 250 feet. And we done some testing with that. We also had some other stuff happening with the Starlink equipment, and we actually have new equipment now. So let's see what all happened. So we had quite a few things happening since the last update. In the last update, our satellite dish was still sitting out on the lawn and was basically still a temporary install. And we were trying to find a more permanent place for the dish, which is somewhat difficult as we are basically in the forest and surrounded by trees. But it definitely had to get away from the lawn because as people were walking in front of it, we lost reception. And if my daughter and her friends were playing out there, we lost reception for several minutes at a time. So I needed to go somewhere else, at least on top of a pole. And that was certainly the intention, to put it on top of a pole at the time. And we ordered a pole adapter from Starlink and expected it to be here in a few days, but it turned out to be back ordered for a couple months. So we didn't get it until a couple weeks ago. In the meantime, lots of other stuff has happened because we had to mow the lawn, and so it was really in a bad spot. We moved the dish around several times to other spots, and we were just looking for a better, more permanent spot. The idea was to put it further out and extend the data cable. And so we did some testing on that. So I bought some Cat 8 cable, which is the best I could find at this point. I believe Starlink says to use 5E or better. That is a basic cable. Of 5E is still very commonly used. I'm not sure why. I personally installed Cat 6 over 10 years ago in our house. And so definitely today I would go with a Cat 8 because that is easily available. I can order that off Amazon. So I ordered a couple 100 feet of Amazon and some connectors with it. So I added 100 feet of it, and that gets us into the utility room. That's where all our utilities come in. So electric, water, satellite, coax cable comes in there. All that stuff comes in there. And we have a box in there on the wall with basically outlets on it. And one of those outlets is the incoming from the outside. And then we use a patch cord from there to one of the other outlets that is an exact image of the outlet in the room that we're sending it to. So we have the patch cord there, and then from there we got another about 40 feet or so to the living room, and that's where we place the router. And I did put the power inserter in the utility room, so it was about 40 feet away from the router and about 200 feet away from the satellite dish. I thought that would be a better option than putting it right next to the router. It all worked. We had this installed, we put the dish further out on the hill, and it all worked fine. We didn't have any issues. In regards to speed, we noticed the same speeds. And at first, when I looked at the latency, I thought, oh, we're lost a little bit here. But then when I took it all out again and went back to the direct connection with just the cable from Starlink, the latency was the same. And I didn't check right before, unfortunately. So I had to assume that the latency was already a bit slower then before I put all this in. And up to this day, I noticed latency hasn't been as good as it used to be. Don't know why. But that said, the speeds itself were still high. We're still in the same areas as before. And we have not noticed any difference while using it with the 200 some feet of cable. Everything was just functioning fine, and we do use our internet for phone calls. Our cell phones are on Wi-Fi calling since there's no cell phone reception out here, and there was no issues even with 250 feet of cable. So that was all pretty cool, but we didn't have a pole adapter, and so it's like, what are we doing now? So we were looking for a better location, and that was probably out on the hill, and we would have to put a pole in and then dig a trench from there to about 20 feet away from the front of the house, where we have an underground box where the telephone line connects, and we would have went in there because from there there's conduit to our utility room. But we will also have to put conduit in from there to the pole, so that the Starlink data cable would be inside a conduit, since it's not a direct burial type of cable. So that would have been the thing to do, but then it's kind of like, yeah, do we want to start this before we have this pole adapter since it's on back order? We didn't do that. We didn't want to have things so we couldn't move them around or whatever. So then other things happened. At some point we lost Wi-Fi. It was completely gone. We did do some stuff 10 minutes before, then got back on the computer, and all of a sudden the Wi-Fi was gone. I checked the router, and the router had a red light. I was like, okay, now what? So I checked the connections, and as I checked the connections, I touched the power inserter, and the power inserter was burning hot at the time. And at that time, we did not have the whole length cable. We only had the 100 feet from Starlink on there. But that power inserter was burning hot, and I mean literally burning hot. The bottom was untouchable. So I unplugged it, stuck it in the freezer for about 10 minutes, pulled it back out, plugged it all back in, and it was working again. And then about 36 hours later, the same thing happened. We lost Wi-Fi, had a red light, and I took my IR thermometer, and the power inserter was 120 degrees on the bottom. And that is a little bit too hot in my opinion. So, but I did the same thing again, stuck it in the freezer, about 10 minutes, plugged it back in, it all worked again. And then at that point, I installed a timer for the power inserter so that it would be disconnected for 5 hours from like midnight till 5 in the morning, and it would have time to cool off. Also contacted Starlink, and Starlink's response was somewhat weird. They said, well, this is normal that they get pretty hot, and it's UL rated, and so on and so forth. It's not an issue. Well, it is an issue when my Wi-Fi goes away, I think. So for some reason, they didn't even respond to me saying there was a red light and the Wi-Fi was going. They just responded to saying, well, the temperature is normal. So I pushed back a little bit and said, well, what if this thing catches on fire? Well, the next response was, we'll send you a new one. So I'm not sure. They never really addressed why it would get hot or if there's anything I could do or check. I don't know. So I left it at that. They sent us a new power inserter. I stuck it in there. It worked fine. So we ran with that, and then our dish was sitting out there. Nothing really has changed. A few weeks later, we lost internet. This time the Wi-Fi signal was still here, but the internet was gone. No connection. And I was actually in the middle of watching a YouTube video. And all of a sudden, this thing starts pausing and trying to load, and nothing happened. And so I looked at it, and yeah, no internet. Looked at the router, red light again. But different this time. Before we lost the Wi-Fi the first time around, the second time around we just lost internet. So that was a little different. Unfortunately, it was on a Saturday too. So we're ways out, and well, how do you get a hold of Starlink if you have no internet and no cell phone reception? So I checked everything out I could. Temperature of the power inserter was fine. I checked all the connections. Everything seemed to be fine. So I unplugged it, plugged it back in. It never went anywhere. It went red again. Did that several times. But I couldn't get it going. So eventually I drove out of the valley, which is about a 15-20 minute drive, and sent a message to Starlink saying, hey, that's the issue. Can you please call me on my landline? Because I have no internet and I have no cell phone reception. So I had to drive out here. So nothing happened. So and then later that day we drove out again, and there was a message from Starlink to test this and this and that, which I already done. And they said provide me the debug info. Just take a screenshot and send it to them. But that was it. So drove back home. Got that debug info and stuff, but I decided not to drive out that night again. I did respond to their message again by saying, hey, please call me at home. So the next morning I'm driving out of here again, and while I was driving out, they called me, but I wasn't home. And then when I was out, I sent them a message and said, hey, please call me. I'm going to drive back in here in a few minutes, but it will be about 20 minutes, 30 minutes before I get home. Well, they called again while I was driving home and left me a message saying, oh, I seen that your message just came in here online. Well, nice. That means I was still out there. So again, I couldn't talk to them on the phone, but they responded again with a message. So later that day I drove out again and got their message, and they asked me again to do certain things and maybe take pictures of this, pictures of that. And I told them again I done already more, that I replaced the patch cord between the power inserter and the router, and I still had the old power inserter that I put it in and tried it with it. And they wanted me to check the connections. They were really stuck on the connectors, and I checked those connectors I don't know how many times. I plugged them in, unplugged them several times, and I ended up even cutting off the original connector on the data cable from the dish and put one of my Cat 8 connectors on there, but it did not resolve anything. But again, next morning, Monday morning now, driving out of the valley again, give them all that information and told them, look, I did everything I could, everything you told me to, all the testing. One of the tests I forgot. They also said remove the router and plug the cable coming from the power inserter directly into your laptop. And I did that, and it was the same result. I did not have internet, but I had a connection to the system. So the network showed up, but no internet. So same thing as going through the router, which basically that test eliminates the router as a problem. So the problem is in the dish itself. And so I provided all that information on Monday morning, and I think later that day when we drove out again, or I don't remember, maybe we went to town that day and stayed in town for a while and got the message there that they will send us new equipment. Since it is not the router, they'll just send us a whole new setup. And I believe we had this setup, this was Monday, and I believe we had it Wednesday or Thursday. It arrived. So it wasn't too bad, yeah, we had to wait a few days. That said, when we had internet with a point-to-point antenna up to the mountain over here, that slow type internet, that equipment failed at one point. That one failed due to lightning. This time there was no lightning, so it was definitely not lightning that killed the Starlink. But anyway, said that other equipment failed and it took them 3 days before they came out and replaced it. So Starlink that had to send it to us, like I said, unfortunately it was Saturday and we were basically staying home. It added a couple extra days, but overall we were satisfied with their equipment replacement coming this quick. And even though it was a little difficult and I would have liked them to make another attempt to call us, would have been a little bit easier, but overall it worked out pretty good, so it's not too bad. So that's it. We got new Starlink equipment, all new, brand new box, everything. Open the box, first thing I noticed, the base was no longer black, the base was gray. The data cable was gray. That was a visual that I noticed right off the back. Everything else looked the same. So at first I was thinking maybe I swap out just the dish to see, but then I noticed the color change and I kind of wondered why. Maybe there's more changes to it or not, so I didn't want to take a risk that one component possibly damages the other, so I just used a whole new kit. Stuck it out there on the lawn, plugged it in, just as I would have done the first time, and then I had to set up my Wi-Fi network again. Obviously it's a full setup again, and it worked just fine. So no problem. Now we still didn't have the pole mount, so I still could not install this thing. And so I thought maybe I try to put it on the roof of the house. The roof or the house is much closer to the trees. Being on the roof, we're much higher, but there is a relatively large tree behind the house that I was pretty sure would block the signal. But I went up there with my cell phone, I checked it out, sure enough, that tree would block the signal some. I decided to do it anyway. I stuck it on the roof and plugged it in, and it got signal. And it worked. We tested the speeds were about the same, latency was about the same, and obviously it takes about 12 to 24 hours before they give you data on obstructions. But then I checked data on obstructions and it showed that I have obstructions. It said something like about every 17 minutes I might see a loss of signal. So that was not what I wanted to see. But I decided to leave it there for now and just see how it works. I wonder if it would affect us, if it's really going to lose the signal. It didn't say how long it would lose the signal. If this is a 1 second loss or a 5 minute loss, didn't know. So that said, the dish still sits up there on the roof now about a week or two later. Yeah, something about a couple weeks later. Pole mount has arrived in the meantime. But if I can leave it up on the roof, then I don't have to dig a trench and set a pole, which makes my life easier. So we're still letting it run on the roof right now, and it seems to work. There is once in a while, I notice a little delay. It must be whenever we have that signal loss, and I look at the Starlink stats, and it does show a signal loss or lost satellites. So it either shows an obstruction or lost satellites on top of the beta downtime that we see once in a while. But it has not really affected us too bad. It's been overall working pretty good. It didn't affect the speeds or the latency. It's all the same still. So it is really just once in a while, and I don't know, maybe I notice it once a day, maybe not even that. Yeah, so even with the obstruction, it still works great. And so at this point, I'm kind of leaning towards leaving that dish on the roof. We'll see. It's still all, again, temporary install at this point. We've been temporary for a long time now, but it works. So we're leaving it at that, and we'll go from there. Now, when I got the new equipment, I had to use the app, and I noticed the app was different. It was not the same anymore. So I was not sure if that was because of the new equipment or if the change was all the way through and everybody's app changed. I don't know. Maybe it's different from old equipment to new equipment. I would assume the app just changed for everybody. So if you have Starlink and you're watching this video, let me know down below in the comments if your app changed. Let me know which equipment you have. Do you have a black base and a black cable, or do you have a gray base and a gray cable? I'm really interested. I'm wondering if it has to do with the equipment. Maybe you even know what the changes were other than the color. I would assume there is more to it than just the color. Usually when somebody manufactures something with a different color, there's usually a reason for it. I'm not sure, but let me know down below in the comments if you know anything about that. But anyway, the app changed, it was different. But when I went on the computer, when I signed in and looked at my stats and everything, that was all the same until just a day ago. So about 2 weeks after I noticed the app change, it also changed on the computer. It's now different there too. It doesn't show the same way anymore that it used to. But still, I can get the same information on the computer. A lot of people said you need the app. I think in my first video, that's mainly when people said that. And well, been doing the things on the computer, checking my Starlink on the computer. I can do the same thing on a computer as you can do on the app. And so that's why maybe I didn't notice that the app changed already several weeks ago. I don't know, because I just done it on a computer, and when you log in from the computer, it was the same. It has not changed. And you do not need the app to get all the information. You can get the same information via computer as you log into your router. The address is provided in the support section, either on your app or on your computer. There is a IP address provided that allows you to log into the router, and you can just log into the router and you get the same exact information as you do on the app. So don't necessarily need to use the app to check out your system or do things. You can do it from the computer as well. In any event, now we got brand new Starlink equipment out there. It is working basically just as before. We're still super happy with the service. As I said in our last video, we're using 2 cell phones on Wi-Fi calling. We have 2 laptops going most of the time. And then my daughter uses a laptop, a tablet, or her cell phone. Once in a while, she mostly uses her cell phone, but she doesn't do any Wi-Fi calling from there. She just uses the Wi-Fi for her apps so she can do her stuff. And what else do we have on the network? Oh, our TV is on the network, obviously. We gotta watch YouTube on the TV. I think that's much cooler than watching it on a cell phone on the big screen. You can get to see everything much better, and if there's some nice scenery and stuff, it looks really super nice. So we watch a lot of YouTube videos on the TV, and that works wonderful too. We haven't really had any issues there. We do Netflix on the TV, we do Apple TV on there as well, and it all works just fine with the Starlink here. And like I said, even with the speeds going up and down, I can look now, I can look in 10 minutes, possibly get a different speed. Latency goes up and down a little bit. If you look at the stats and look at this, the lights going green, green, yellow, red, I believe. they kind of go forward, back, and switch around, and I have not noticed that affecting us at all whatsoever. That said, we're not gaming. I guess gaming is the thing when you need super fast. We don't game, so it works just fine for us. So it's really usable even with the obstruction we have currently. So that is pretty amazing. I noticed around here in the valley, I've seen lots of white dots pop up. I mean, there's lots of Starlink dishes popping up out here. Because there's no fast other internet option out here, people signed up for Starlink a long time ago. And I seen one about 3 miles down the road, one of our neighbors. He has the dish sitting on his back porch. He has a relatively tall house. The dish kind of faces away from the house right into the trees. I mean, he's closer to the trees than me, and he's got like a wall of trees there. And I thought this dish would not be there for long. He would move it. It's been there for a few weeks now, and he has not moved it. So I'm pretty sure he's got an obstruction too, but again, it doesn't bother him, or he doesn't notice it, just like we don't. With the obstructions, we still don't really notice any issues. Like I said, maybe once a day, even though initially it said I would have an outage about every 17 minutes. So it's pretty crazy. I think Starlink is the way to go if you live in a rural area. Obviously, if you live in town and you got cable coming in and you already got 100 plus megabits on your cable, you don't need Starlink. It's really only for people like us out in the boonies, because we need it. We have no other option. So this is the only way we can get fast internet for us. So it would be nice if you really don't need it. Don't sign up for it. Leave it for the people that need it. And there will be so many more people. And just now that Starlink almost covers the entire world, I guess, except the poles at this point. Leave it to the people that need it, please. If you don't need it, if you already have fast internet, I know Starlink is cool. And it's great if you want to support Starlink, but maybe leave it up to the people that really need it so they can get it. Because for us, this was such a huge step. This was amazing. I mean, going from snail speed to this speed, this was just an amazing experience. It's been an amazing ride with Starlink, and I think Starlink does great. It's just so super cool for us out here to finally have an internet that is usable and really works. So that is it. Thank you for watching. Please give us a thumbs up, and if you haven't done so yet, subscribe to our channel. And if there is anything happening with our Starlink, I'll let you know. I might do another update in a couple months. It depends a little bit. If you have any questions, please post them down below in the comments, and I'll try to answer them to the best of my knowledge. Oh, another one that I got is power consumption. And Starlink answered to that with 11 watts for the router. They didn't point out what the dish would really take, but I have not noticed an increase in like my electric bill or anything. So it's definitely very minimal if there is anything, since the power has to go through these data cables, which are super skinny. So we cannot run huge amperages through there. There is not much power through there. I assume the total system is probably under 40 watts, even with the heater going in the dish. So if you know how much power the whole system uses, let me know down below in the comments, please. Starlink said the router uses 11 watts, but well, there's more equipment in the dish, including the heater, that needs power too. Also, I've seen some reports of the dish overheating, and then shutting down. We haven't had that issue, and we just went through the heat wave. You may have seen that in the news about the Northwest and the heat wave. We're kind of through it at this point, maybe, I believe. We'll see today. The forecast is for temperatures below 100 degrees. But the last 3 days we were above 100 degrees. We came up to 105 degrees, and we did not have any issues with that. So yeah, we're still happy with Starlink, and we're sticking to Starlink, and maybe they come out with a mobile solution soon. That would be cool too. We have a Cybertruck on reservation. We hope it will show up maybe by the end of the year, maybe by spring next year or so, and we would love to hook up a travel trailer to it and travel around a little bit, and maybe have a new Starlink mobile version on that travel trailer. We'll see. Well, again, thank you for watching. Goodbye.